There is a law older than any court, older than any written code, older than the oldest king who ever sat on a throne. It does not need a judge. It does not need a witness. It simply works, the way rain follows clouds and harvest follows seed. And if you have ever watched someone build their life on a crooked foundation, then you already know, even before the story ends, how it finishes. In the small trading town of Bimpur, where the spice market hummed from dawn until the evening prayer, there lived a cloth merchant named Haridas. He was clever the way a crow is clever, always watching, always calculating, always looking for the gap between what something was worth and what he could convince someone to pay. His stall was bright with color, silk from the south, cotton from the east, wool dyed in shades that caught the eye from across the lane, and Haridas stood at its center like a spider who had learned to smile. He was not always dishonest. That is the saddest part of stories like his. Once, as a young apprentice, he had weighed fabric with care and spoken prices that were fair. But somewhere between ambition and fear, between the hunger to succeed and the terror of falling behind, a small voice had whispered to him, "Take a little more. No one will notice. Just a little more." And he had listened. His technique was elegant in the way that deception often is. When a village woman came to buy 3 meters of cloth for her daughter's wedding, Haridas would fold the fabric with practiced hands, his thumb secretly pressed against the measuring stick, shaving 1/2 meter here, 1/4 meter there. When a farmer arrived seeking cotton for work clothes, the scale would tilt just slightly, not enough to cry fraud, but enough to fill Haridas's pocket a few rupees heavier each day. He told himself it was simply business. He told himself that everyone did it. He told himself that a man must survive. Years passed like monsoon clouds rolling through the valley, heavy and unhurried. Haridas grew prosperous. His stall expanded into a shop. His shop expanded into a small warehouse. He hired 2 boys to help him measure and carry, and he watched them carefully, knowing how theft worked because he himself was its teacher. His children wore good clothes. His wife cooked on a new stove. By every visible measure, Haridas had succeeded. But there is a kind of hollowness that lives inside walls built on dishonesty. You cannot see it from outside. The walls look solid. The roof does not leak. The lamp burns bright. But inside, something is always slightly wrong. A smell you cannot name, a weight you carry without knowing why, a restlessness that makes the nights longer than they should be. Then, one ordinary morning in his 43rd year, a young man came to Haridas's shop. He was perhaps 25 with the eager eyes of someone new to business, and he said he wanted to buy 30 meters of fine cotton, a large order, paid in cash. Haridas's instincts lit up like a flame meeting oil. He measured with his usual sleight of hand, speaking warmly all the while, pointing out the quality of the weave, the durability of the dye. The young man smiled and nodded and paid without complaint. What Haridas did not know was that the young man was the nephew of the district's most respected market inspector, and what happened next came not with anger or accusation, but with something far more devastating, public record. 3 days later, a notice was posted at the entrance of the market. A formal audit had been conducted. Several merchants had been found using irregular measurements. The names were listed. Haridas's name was first. He stood at the edge of the gathered crowd and read his own name, and something crumbled in his chest that no wealth could repair. His customers read the notice. His neighbors read it. The 2 boys who worked for him read it. His children, walking home from school, stopped to look at the crowd and saw their father's name written in ink that seemed to burn through the paper. Within a week, half his regular buyers had gone to other stalls. Within a month, the ones who remained were the ones with nowhere else to go. Within a year, the warehouse stood nearly empty, and Haridas sat behind his counter, not counting profits, but counting regrets, which are a currency that only compounds and never spends. He went once to visit an old merchant named Bhavaji, who had sold grain in the market for 40 years and retired with the deep contentment of a man who had nothing to hide. Haridas sat across from him and said, barely above a whisper, "I don't understand how this happened to me." Bhavaji was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know why the river is never empty?" Haridas shook his head. "Because it gives," said Bhavaji, "constantly, to the fields, to the animals, to the people downstream, and in return, the rain fills it again. But a pond that takes and does not give, it sits still and slowly turns to mud. You were a pond, Haridas, and ponds do not last." Haridas walked home slowly that evening, and the words moved through him like water through cracked earth. This ancient wisdom speaks to us still in our modern world of quick transactions and digital storefronts, where it is easier than ever to cut corners and hope no one is watching. We face the same crossroads Haridas faced, and the choice is the same one it has always been. So understand this deeply. First, recognize that reputation is not built in years. It is built in moments, one transaction at a time, one honest measurement at a time, and it is destroyed the same way. Second, know that karma does not work like lightning. It works like water, slowly, patiently, carving through even the hardest stone. What you practice becomes your character, and your character becomes your fate. Third, remember that the fear behind dishonesty is always a lie. Haridas cheated because he feared there would never be enough, but the cheating itself ensured there would be less. Scarcity thinking creates scarcity. Trust creates abundance. Fourth, understand that when you give people fair value, full measure, honest price, genuine care, you are not being generous. You are being intelligent, because a customer who trusts you is worth 10 times a customer you tricked. And fifth, ask yourself tonight, quietly, with honesty, is there any place in my life where my thumb is pressing against the scale? Not in a market stall, perhaps, but somewhere, in a relationship, in a promise made, in effort withheld. Because the law of karma does not distinguish between cloth and character. What you measure out into this world will, in time, be measured back to you. Karma never forgets. And the beautiful truth hidden inside that warning is this. It means that every honest choice you make today is also being recorded, quietly and faithfully, waiting to return to you in ways you may not yet imagine. Ask yourself, what kind of merchant are you? Of goods, of words, of trust?